Here's an interesting factoid. Some of the most capable people still feel like imposters, especially when they're growing fast. Welcome to the Leadership Career Accelerator, where we help aspiring leaders like you build executive presence, influence with impact, and get recognized and promoted. I am longtime CEO Barry Moline. My mission is to help you grow as a leader, elevate your career, and improve your life. If you enjoy learning leadership tools, hit subscribe. In return, my promise is to keep bringing you ideas that make you a better leader. Why do capable, high-performing people still feel like imposters, even after promotions, praise, and real success? Imposter syndrome often shows up when people are growing, stepping into new responsibilities, or feeling pressure to prove they belong. In this episode, Ian Clausen and I explore how workplace fear, rumination, ego, expectations, and growth all shape the way leaders see themselves, and how shifting from "I have to know everything" to "let's learn together" can reduce pressure and build stronger teams. Here's what you'll take away. You'll understand the different types of workplace fears that fuel imposter syndrome. You'll understand how to use the mirror test to move from feeling like a victim to taking responsibility for growth. And you'll learn to replace the pressure to perform with a more collaborative, learning-focused leadership mindset. Today, we're talking with Ian Clausen. Ian is a leadership strategist and facilitator focused on helping organizations translate connection into performance. His work centers on building shared judgment, strengthening leadership coherence, and enabling teams to move faster without sacrificing trust or accountability. Let's get into it. Welcome, Ian.
Great to be here, Barry. Thanks for having me.
So, Ian, we're talking about imposter syndrome, and it's the kind of thing that a lot of people have, a lot of people go through, including myself. Why do you think that high-performing, capable people often feel like imposters, even after they've gotten promotions, they've gotten a lot of affirmation, they've gotten praise, they've clearly seen success? Why do you think they still feel like an imposter?
Well, it's such a great topic and question. This happens to be one of the things that I devoted a bit of research towards, and it happens to cover our human condition of fear, right? Nobody really talks about fear in the workplace as leaders or as employees, but it's ever present and it's all around us. And so this isn't the type of fear like my daughter at 11 o'clock at night is screaming and we're all jumping out of bed, the lights are on, there's a spider on our wall. This is more about the fear that's tied to our work. So we actually identified three types of fear. So the first type of fear is fear from someone else. This could be a passive aggressive email you receive. You could be on a performance improvement plan for the first time. Your fear is related to what others are imposing upon you. And so that usually manifests in certain behaviors. So if a team member or you find yourself blaming others for this type of situation, it usually stems back to this type of fear. The second type is more self-inflicted. It's something that I've had issues with throughout my professional life. It's the rumination. It's kind of retracing your steps after a meeting. Maybe you were on the task to give a presentation and you're thinking about all the things that you forgot to say, or maybe you had a gaffe or you stumbled upon part of the data that you were supposed to present, and you're with your peers, you're with your supervisor. That the behavior's tied to self-inflicted fear. It's complaining. And so the third type of fear is the most unique in my view. And I think it's more positioned in this imposter syndrome territory, which is fear that's tied to our growth. And so this could be new situations like that promotion scenario you just mentioned, right? It's a little scary. You obviously got noticed for your capabilities and skill set, And there's something there as a baseline, but there's still a shadow of doubt when we engage in new endeavors. And so that is a healthy type of fear. And if we can kind of parse out these different types of fear that we experience in the workplace, I think we're better suited to navigate this imposter syndrome.
So, do you want to talk about the types of fear and how to address how we feel as an imposter with each one?
We could, yeah. So here's another dimension to imposter syndrome. We actually we coined another term called posture syndrome, which is actually in the same vein. I think a lot of times imposter syndrome has this multi-dimensional kind of view about it. And so, going through the three types of fear, I think helps. But there's another dimension too, which is I think imposter syndrome is a very human condition of growth and these type of fears. It's related to fear. Posture syndrome is more performative and it's related to ego. And so it's more like, hey, I know, maybe the phrase fake it till you make it, right? Sometimes that gets lumped into imposter syndrome, but I've never liked that placement there. I think it's more in this kind of ego-based, ego-driven, I'm going to project something that I'm not willingly, and you do feel like a fraud.
So posture syndrome is not the opposite of imposter syndrome. It's just acting like the
It's
role
another
that you're in.
form.
Yeah.
That's right. So one is fear based and the other is ego driven.
Yeah.
And that's just one of our perspectives about it. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about each one of those and techniques for overcoming them. Before we do that, let me clarify one thing. So I was a CEO for 29 years, and I will say that I felt like an imposter often until I adopted a new strategy about how best to work together with my team and approach new issues. I worked in the utility industry, and there was constant innovation, and it was hard to keep up with all the changes. Once I adopted a growth mindset where I wanted to learn and educate myself and implore upon my colleagues, my staff, to do the same, to constantly be learning. Learning makes you vulnerable. And
Indeed.
Instead of just saying, go and learn, we're all just going to go and learn stuff and just be smart, I would say, let's go learn stuff and then come back and share that with others and just see what we know. It's sort of like, I think they do this in the medical field. They say, learn one, do one, teach one. And we would talk about the learning as sort of a group activity. Once we started to go down that road of adopting the growth mindset, I felt like I didn't have to know everything going into every situation. And it was okay to say, I've heard about that. I don't know all the details. Tell me more. And it felt different. The whole process felt a lot different from the before time where I really felt I had to, one, be in charge. I had to project that I knew stuff, and I don't know. It changed my brain. It literally changed my brain, and so now I feel like there are things that I know and things that I don't know as well. And when I get in those situations,
right?
I'll say, I'm a little familiar with this. Let's figure out, how my knowledge fits in with your knowledge, and let's, work on this together. Anyway, that's what's worked for me. Still, when I still fight it because I have to sort of like invoke that process, that thought process, because I think my natural temperature is that, dang it, you really ought to know, Barry. You really should know that. And I'll just tell you this one story that happened where this is where the light switch went from off to on or whatever. It was in my second year of being a CEO. So this was in the in the 1990s, and my first year went pretty well, and there wasn't a lot of friction. But the second year, I was in a legislative hearing in the Florida Capitol, and it was on a new topic that I didn't know a ton about. I was working with a group of utilities, and we were all trying to, this analogy, touch the elephant from different places and describe it, so that's
paint the picture. Yeah.
Yeah. So no one really had a full picture, but we were sort of all expected to be experts. And we were in this legislative hearing, and each one of our witnesses from among our utilities were giving a different perspective on what they were seeing at their utility, and the topic was telecommunications. So we were electric utilities, and a few of our electric utilities were getting into telecommunications. So you can see that, electric utilities, phone companies, they're different, right? So yeah, we were definitely out of our element. And every one of our speakers, every one of our witnesses was getting exposed of the knowledge that they didn't have, just one after another. It's like, well, here's what we're doing. And then there'd be a question like, well, what about, the C swing, light switch, fiber? Are you working on that? Well, I'll have to get back with you on that, because, and everybody was sort of being embarrassed like that. And one of my members turned to me, and we were sitting in the audience, and he said this very sincerely. He said, somebody really needs to get up there and stand up for us. Really just needs to, just to be the expert. And I said to him,
pick up the pieces.
Yeah, somebody needs to do that. Yeah. And then I sat back and I thought, shit, that's me. That's supposed to be me. Oh my God. Well, I'm never going to let that happen again. And instead of just trying to be ultra prepared, what I did was say, I don't know. Let's work on this together so we can all be prepared. And that was sort of that light bulb moment for me. It didn't resolve the problem overnight. It just changed the way I started thinking about it, because
relieved part of the pressure, right?
Yes, it relieved the pressure, and it just changed our approach. So that was just how it happened for me. But I still struggle with it, because I'm constantly, presented with new ideas and new projects, and like, well, how do we do that? Well, let's see if we can work on that together. Anyway, that's just how I struggled with it over time. Now back to fear. Do you want to talk about when someone else is imposing this fear on you? That was
Sure.
The first element. You talked about a performance improvement plan, so somebody's on the ropes, or maybe a colleague is showing that they know more than I do, and therefore I'm feeling like, well, damn, I'm dumb here, and I really ought to know. Is that the kind of fear you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. So first of all, I think this shows up as a victim mindset, right? When someone's imposing something on us, we tend to blame others or something else for the situation. And so that starting premise is not a healthy one in our professional lives, right? As victims. And so we have something called the mirror test, where it starts with a very simple question. It's, you could physically or rhetorically look into a mirror and ask yourself, what do I need to do differently? And just that question alone can rewire that scenario from victim towards taking responsibility. Now, you may not be at fault for the conditions that led to something being imposed on you, but you can take responsibility from that moment moving forward on how you're going to handle it. And so rather than live in and reside in that type of fear constantly, the mirror test is a quick kind of switch code.
So you mean like, this isn't going well. What do I need to do differently? Right? So it's kind of a recognition that this isn't going well. Instead of being in the moment and just responding, it's sort of like stepping back and saying like, this is not going well. Okay, what other actions can I take? So you're thinking about being in the moment and responding, but you're also thinking about, evaluating the situation, right? Is that what you're talking about? Okay.
Yeah. So let's take the performance improvement plan. If it's presented to you, most of us are taken off guard when that's happening, right? It's like, what, me? What did I do wrong? So you're guarded in that encounter. Whereas you could just take responsibility and say, you know what, I'd like to understand this. Let me learn, your perspective about my work performance. And you can ask deeper questions in that moment. But you get through that scenario and you have time you handle that scenario well to begin with. And then you have time to assess. How am I going to approach my performance now moving forward? Am I looking for a new job, or am I going to buckle down? And how do I need to communicate differently with my supervisor? What are the optics there? What haven't I been doing? It's not just all victim mode. So it's really looking at what steps can I take to move forward, even if this is not fun, even if this is unpleasant.
Is there a language that someone can use that can help them, like just saying, let me see if I understand this. Are you saying, or repeat back what they're saying, put it in your own words? I'm just, somebody's coming at you sort of like that Bose commercial where, they're just, like blowing sound at you, right? And it feels like you're, on your heels. Is that one way to respond, where you can put it back in your own language and ask, are you saying that what if when I'm late for meetings that it's not good it slows down the entire meeting or something like that? Or I'm not exactly, that was just one example where performance might need to be improved. But does that help?
Yeah, it sure does. I think we're cautious to be in agreement with something that is negative perception on our behalf, right? And so you can be aligned with, hey, I understand that there's a perception here about some of my performance. And I think those clarifying questions could lead to deeper understanding and maybe turn into a constructive dialogue between both parties.
Yeah.
Now, performance improvement plans perhaps is not the best example here, because usually when they're deployed, there's usually a decision from HR or upper management about a person, right? And so, but this is still a very good tactic that could be deployed.
Yeah.
The mirror tests in any situation tied to these type of fears.
So the second one was rumination, and this is classic, constant. You do something, as you said, and then you think about it afterwards. I should have said this. I should have used that hand motion, whatever it is. Or even on the positive side, things might go well, and you say to your colleagues, was that okay? Was there anything I could do that could make it better? And because you just feel like, I don't even know if I made a mistake, but I want to hear if there's a mistake, because
Right.
I'm ruminating.
Yeah, I think we spend so much time in these states of worry and what could go wrong, or just retracing and replaying scenarios. That's actually the definition of mindset. It's a setting in your mind, right? I don't think we usually look at the real linguistics here. So you don't like your current story that you're telling yourself, it's time to tell a better story. So a lot of that has to do with show versus tell. You're not going to think your way out of this perception. You do need to do some things different. You need to make some sacrifices, perhaps make some changes. So it goes beyond the mirror test of that premise of what do I need to do differently? And now it's actually starting to do and show up differently.
Well, when you are ruminating, okay, so I think rumination is a constant. And maybe we should think about it another way too, in that it's also important, let's say, to ruminate to improve. I want to think about what I just did so that I can do better next time. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. When you think about it under through the lens of fear, then it's bad.
That's right. If it's growth, right? It could be very healthy, actually. Yeah.
But it's still it's still there. It's there. And yes, depending on the lens as you think about it, whether it's fear or growth. When I was in my 20s, I was a professional hockey referee, and at every game we would have an evaluator, but basically it was a manager who was sitting in a booth high up and would evaluate all the officials on the ice constantly. And we have a rule book that we follow, and we have positions we're supposed to be in, but we're in a game where everybody's moving around and there's chaos. Still, it was expected after every game to ruminate, to get feedback, to improve. That was the goal, to improve. And sometimes you heard things like your arm wasn't straight enough when you put it up, or your elbowing signal
techniques.
was it was too aggressive when you went like that, or something, whatever it might be. And you need to tone that down. And I saw some folks get really unhappy about that, but the referees that grew and became better listened and just made appropriate changes. So yeah, I see that sort of fear versus growth, but we got used to it, having that evaluation constantly. It was really, it's sort of like you go to a meeting, and then after the meeting there's another meeting where people evaluate how that meeting went.
How it went.
Yeah, it was fairly constant. Today I still referee, and we do a little bit of that evaluation stuff, but I play hockey. And after every game, I mean, there's so many mistakes that go on in a hockey game, so many bizarre things. And one of the funniest ones is that this constantly happens, is that the puck gets sort of like lost in people's feet. And, you're wearing a mask that limits your vision. And sometimes when the puck is, straight down, it's hard to see where it is. You just don't know where it is. There are a couple times when I will literally be looking around like, I saw the puck in the air. Where did it go? Yeah. And then people on your bench will yell, feet. And you just go like, oh, it's right here. Yeah. So afterwards you think, dang it. That was so stupid. I should have known that. I mean, it was just, I should have followed the puck better, or I should have lifted that guy's stick before he shot a goal, whatever it was.
Right.
I was right there. And it took a while after, and in my hockey playing days, my more competitive days, when I would stop ruminating and just not worry about it. Just say like, yeah, that happened. Well, put it this way. It was the shift between growth and fear was very, very strong, right? It was unclear which direction I was going. Like fear would be like, I might lose my position here on this team, versus how do I improve that so that I can be better next time?
Right. And I think we tend to see things in two dimensions in most categories, right? Mm-hmm. So getting that feedback after the game from the manager as refs, I'm sure you've witnessed, or even you yourself have been reactive to some of the critique. And we tend to think that the only other alternative is to be proactive. Well, I need to be better prepared, and I need to learn from these mistakes. And while that's true, there's actually a third dimension that we point to in our work as well, which is a co-creative response. So it's a reframing of situations like that as you're getting critique or feedback. And so the human nature is to be reactive, right? What? I didn't do that. That's you think I hit it too hard, but I didn't hit it too hard. Proactive isn't the only path forward. And so if you could frame it like the manager, the set of refs, the teams, you're all a part of this ecosystem. There's a shared goal, there's shared purpose. So if the aim is to be co-creative, we're all looking to improve and get better.
Yeah, that is true. That's a good way to think about it. You have to have a culture where vulnerability is acceptable, and there has to be some safe space. Probably, if it's a really super competitive culture, that may be a little harder. But those are circumstances to evaluate. The last one that you mentioned regarding fear was that it's tied to growth, and I think we've talked about it. That's the way that we want to approach fear, right? Or at least when we have these feedback moments, that we think about it in a more positive way, right?
That's right. That's the healthy way to approach imposter syndrome, is to see this as a journey for growth.
Got it.
And so as it relates to others, everyone's playing a part. We are receiving signals and feedback from our team members, from our bosses. So how are we going to respond?
Yeah.
you know and to cultivate a lifetime of learning and growth doesn't mean you're just going to be this know-it-all that absorbs knowledge, but to your point earlier in our conversation, it's really about sharing wisdom together, right,
Hmm.
in the group setting. That's when you can apply the knowledge that you're bringing to the table, compare it, or size it up with other combinations of knowledge and experience and perspectives that other people have, and that's shared wisdom. Now, how do we extrapolate that? How do we apply this? How does that improve our team, right?
Yeah. So I have kind of an interesting situation to ask you about. So let's say you're a young professional in the workforce, young professional to mid-level manager, and we're working on a project with some senior managers, and the senior manager is overconfident. Let's say they feel like, oh, I've been here before, I've seen this before, I can connect these dots. And they're very quick to give feedback on the problem. Here's the solution, here's the answer. When the answer is actually much more gray than it is black and white, and they haven't vetted all of the information, and they're missing a lot of the nuance. So me as that younger person, I know all the nuance because I've studied this, and now I'm presenting this to my senior manager, who is just saying that'll never work, kind of a thing. In that situation, I'm feeling like, as that younger person, I'm feeling like my manager is being really closed-minded. Maybe they're suffering from imposter syndrome, and they feel like they have to show that they're in charge in some way, and like they're fearful that they don't know as much as I do because I've been studying this. And I think that's not an uncommon situation where
Right.
senior managers will make these snap judgments. Do you feel like there's a way for a younger person to respond to that, to try to open their
Right.
mind a little bit?
Yeah, if I zoom out at that dynamic that you just described, there two things come to mind. So one, from an organizational standpoint and leadership, we should do our best to aim for inclusion, where we're involving ideas and not just be the one with all the ideas. And so there's that dynamic at play. But the other concept is belonging. And sometimes inclusion and belonging is kind of a paraphrased definition for folks, right? It's kind of one of the same, it may be coming from a different wording. But belonging is an individual contribution. It's owning your subject matter, your skill sets, to a degree that it's not about defending ideas or pitting ideas against each other. It's about having that voice and confidence, and perhaps, navigating that may be a little bit more delicate, right? Where you're like looking for more clarity. So instead of competing with ideas, open up the dialogue again with a question. And so it could just be a question about clarity. It doesn't have to appear weak, like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't understand this. It's more of I want to understand your thinking on this. And so it's less about pointing fingers and pointing towards a solution, right?
Yeah, it's not me versus you. It's let's talk about this idea some more. And
Right.
I want to understand your thinking about that idea. Yeah, that's a good approach. I really like that. So tell me why you feel that imposter syndrome gets worse, or sometimes can get worse, after somebody gets a promotion and they feel more pressure. What's going on there?
Well, it's that third type of fear. It's the fearing of growth, and perhaps a combination of some of the other fears as well. And so it's our relationship with fear, quite frankly, that keeps us in imposter syndrome or in this growth mode. And so part of it is being aware of the fears and how it affects our workplace, how it
Mm-hmm.
affects our teams, how it affects leadership, how it affects an employee's contributions. And so it's really changing that story that you're telling yourself in your head and starting to tell a better story, and not lean into the posture syndrome side of it. I'm just going to pretend that there's no kinks in my armor. It's more of a co-creative approach. That should be the aim. And you don't have to be reactive or proactive or just be ultra prepared like you were talking about in that one meeting in Florida. It's more of a let's tackle this together. Let's have collective intelligence around this project or this problem that we're trying to solve. You can make much better progress with that aim in place.
That's tricky. I think that's really like diving into the deep end of shifting a culture. You're now the new boss. You've got 5 people you're managing,
Right.
instead of before you were just one of those people that was on the team. And instead of being that person who has all the answers, you're saying that's not the right approach, or there's another approach, and that is, you can say, let's all work on this together.
Right.
It feels
Being
like,
open,
yeah,
setting that tone, right? Like that's a leadership signal, right? You could continue to do the traditional playbook of I have the title, I have to have all the answers, like I own this project. And then it turns into workplace politics. Now it's about optics. Now it's about, well, I'm going to cast blame on why this project fell apart or we didn't hit this deadline. So if you are getting promoted, it's easy to copy that existing playbook that is so prevalent.
right.
Or you could start to send a better signal out there. And it doesn't have to be all at once or some sweeping, hey, like we're going to revolutionize this culture. It's steps to success, right?
So it's a type of leadership that you choose. I'm going to choose inclusive leadership as opposed to authoritarian type leadership.
Command and control, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Do you think that some folks have a strong desire to look confident, and because that puts up a shield over their self-doubt?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a social scientist by the name of Irvin Goffman. He was featured in our book. He actually in the late '60s he would observe people by sitting in crowded like malls, and so it was very fascinating because his thesis was life is a stage, and so in this situation, work is a stage, right? So we might blur the lines of performance. It's not just about results. Sometimes it's performative. And so his work really uncovers a lot of the psychology and social construct around performance. And so we all engage in impression management, right? We want to give the right impression, but we're also judging and making impressions of people around us. And so there is a level of expectation that we're supposed to act a part if it's our job title. And that's the complication, I think, with life as a stage is we carry multiple roles with us, right? I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a shooting guard on the basketball court. I'm a project manager at work. I'm a Sunday school teacher at church. And so we wear these multiple hats. And so to switch performances and roles, that causes stress and anxiety. And I think we obsess a little bit too much about or around performance. And so it's important for us to zoom out and understand this drama that's playing out at work, really.
That's great that you point out all those different hats that we wear, because we have different, I don't know, different profiles. I mean, we have different leadership profiles, and all those. We might be the manager at work, and if we're on the basketball team, we're just one of 5 that's on the court, and
Right.
it's a team sport. When we're the teacher, when we're the Sunday school teacher, we're at the head of the class, but we also want to do activities with our students and that are inclusive. And there's just a whole variety of ways and places where we are sometimes in charge and sometimes we are being led by others. And it's important to feel comfortable in all those. We can't lead in every situation.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And to learn about our roles in each one of those situations. And sometimes they cross in terms of our approach to them. So if imposter syndrome is a signal, you're talking about this as something we notice potentially in ourselves. it's not a flaw. It's just something that is out there that many people experience. So what can people who are feeling imposter syndrome, what can they do differently instead of trying to silence it? Because that's what they want to do. It's like, I don't know. This like stop it, stop it. What can they do differently to just to address it and sort of go with the flow?
Yeah, so I think going back to the mirror test, that's always a great kind of starting point because you look in the mirror and you're like, what can I do differently? Start with that question.
Yeah.
But then a lot of our friction actually doesn't have to do with standards as much as it has to do with expectations. And so it's important to kind of reframe this on a personal level as a contributor, employee, or as a middle manager, a leader. It's yes, you need to aim at your standards. You need to live up to your own standards that you place for yourself. That you do your best, right? And show a little grace when you're not quite there on certain days. But second to that is to avoid some of the friction as a leader or contributor is you want to lower your expectations of others because team standards and self standards are one thing. Expectation is all the detail and nuance that we place on top of standards, right? It's, well, I wouldn't have done it this way, or this needs to be done within a certain time frame, and I usually operate like this, and you need to too. That's an expectation. One of the pet peeves I have in my relationships and communication is I'm very swift and quick to respond to text messages and emails. It's not everyone's style to do that. And I shouldn't hold people to that expectation. But the standard is, should there be timely communication with each other? Yes. And we should give each other an understandable amount of space to do so. At the end of the day, 24 hours, 48 hours, if it's not an urgent matter, a nice response back, a quick response back is worthwhile. But I think understanding those nuances of standards and expectations, I think help us move out of imposter syndrome. And we're not even thinking about that label anymore because we're moving in the growth territory that we should be in to begin with.
Yeah. So in sort of wrapping up and bringing it together, is that the first step is that, as you call the mirror test, in thinking I'm in this situation, what else can I be doing differently? There's a variety of techniques I can use, but I need to be I need to be looking at this conversation from the outside, above it, as well as being in it, but still asking that question, it's not going quite right. What else can I do?
Right. How can I take responsibility for the fears that I experience?
Mm-hmm.
How am I responding to these fears? But also, how can I take responsibility for my growth in that trajectory? And how can I take responsibility for how I'm showing up within a team dynamic as a leader or team member?
Yeah, that's great. And having that responsibility and having that growth mindset and recognizing that you can't know everything on every subject. So saying it's okay and
Right.
saying let's learn together, or saying I don't know, I'll find out, or let's find out together, is it's a way to get out of that rut, I guess I'd say, of always trying to be an expert, right?
That's right.
So how do you help people? Do you teach classes? Do you coach? What's your, how do you help society?
Yeah. Well, a little bit of self promotion, but wrote a book called Brave Together.
Uh-huh.
So I think that's very, very complementary to the type of conversation we had today. So yeah, a thought leader and author. I'm a consultant. I help leadership, development and team dynamics and shaping cultures people love and want to be a part of.
Do you
I
do training for groups at companies? What is your typical client? Is it a group or is it an individual?
Yeah, we have two verticals that we focus on. So tech companies, mid-size startup range. Enterprise gets a little bit more complex, but we have done work with Amazon and Apple. Healthcare is another vertical of ours, and I think that it's ripe for disruption. There's a lot of change that leaders are reaching for and there's not readily available answers with this pressure to do AI adoption, the market shifts, the layoffs, and the nursing shortages at hospital chains and things of that nature. And so there's a lot of good work that we're engaging in with teams. Our approach is we like to start with a leader in their team. We don't do a traditional, let's roll it out to the whole company, although we're capable of that. But it's very important for us to get a dynamic with a leader in their team as a template for the rest of the organization, and that could scale.
Yeah, well, that's great. I'll put your email address in the show notes along with a link to the book, Brave Together.
Awesome. Yeah,
Great.
thank you so much, Barry, for having me.
Yeah, it's been wonderful talking with you, Ian, and I appreciate all of your insight and the way you broke down imposter syndrome. Thanks.
Thank you.
So, what's the one big takeaway from this episode? The one idea you can implement today? I think it's this. When imposter syndrome shows up, don't treat it as proof that you don't belong. Treat it as a signal that you're growing. Ian Clausen makes a really useful distinction here. Some fear comes from other people, some comes from our own rumination, and some comes from stepping into something bigger than we've done before. That third kind of fear is often what we call imposter syndrome. The practical move is what Ian calls the mirror test. Pause and ask, what do I need to do differently? That question moves you out of victim mode and into responsibility. You don't have to pretend you know everything. You don't have to fake confidence. You can say, I don't know yet, but let's learn this together. That's where imposter syndrome starts to lose its grip, because leadership isn't about having every answer. It's about taking responsibility for your growth and helping others grow with you. Okay, it's time for action. If you're tired of managing drama, chasing accountability, and carrying the weight of a low-energy team, it's time for a better way. I help leaders and organizations build stronger teams, healthier cultures, and real momentum. Together, we'll identify where your current structure is falling short and what it will take to move you from a stagnant, conflict-filled environment to a high-performing, purpose-driven organization. I speak and train frequently on leadership, teamwork and culture, influence and persuasion, and AI and the future of work. Now is the time for action. Send me an email at barrymoline@gmail.com and let's explore how to move you forward. I'm Barry Moline. See you soon.